The Witcher 2 is the game in the series I knew least about when I started playing. I had seen near to nothing about it in terms of gameplay, story, and graphics, therefore making me about as unbiased as I could reasonably be while playing it. First impressions? I was disappointed. Yes, disappointed. Even though the first game was a convoluted mess that somehow managed to come together into one of my favorite games of all time, this higher budgeted, clearly more polished product managed to disappoint me within its first hour or so. How did it manage this? Well, let me tell you. In the opening section right after the tutorial, you're forced to follow NPCs around, aim things at other things so they can explode, mash your left mouse button for QTEs, go down long linear corridors, and, of course, there's an arbitrary stealth section. Not to mention, the UI has clearly been redesigned for console users in mind, making inventory management even worse than the first game. Everything about this game was giving me the impression that it was a sequel aimed at the casual console market. I was saddened by this, having expected another hardcore RPG to sink my starving teeth into, which is why I'm so happy that my first impressions were oh so wrong. The Witcher 2 is, in fact, better than what it appears to be on the surface. Many things about it seem to be the typical archetypes of the modern AAA game, and yet it isn't. Of course, now I'll have to explain why. The game is undoubtedly more linear than the first. It's not so much an open world as it is a collection of spaghetti noodle corridors leading out from a central point. Linearity in an RPG is often criticized. After all, there's nothing better than diving into an expansive open world ripe with side content and a wealth of interesting things to find. The problem is how many open worlds actually achieve this sense of wonder that makes Skyrim and Breath of the Wild such captivating experiences. I can think of few games that even come close to creating perfect or even good open worlds. The thing about linear games is that they can be polished to a pearl shine much more efficiently than a sprawling virtual space. In linear games, developers can focus time and energy on making every moment as fantastic and balanced as it can be, which just isn't possible in an open world game. There's always going to be some bug or glitch they didn't find during testing. Look at anything Ubisoft has made in the past 5 years as an example of the pitfalls of the sandbox genre. They make about 5 hours of enjoyable content and then spread it out into 30 hours of garbage. Their games are so unpolished that you can find bugs literally in the first 5 seconds of gameplay. Everything about them is watered down, lacking substance. Now, back to The Witcher 2. It really is a polished game. Sure, I'm not without my nitpicks, but at least they cared. They cared about making a good game for the sake of the medium, not just about how much money it would put in the pockets of their shareholders, and that alone is commendable. The beginning hour or so of the game is a ruse, unindicative of the actual game hidden behind it. There's no way you can argue that this game was dumbed down in pretty much every way. What wasn't outright improved upon was removed for good reason. The fat clutching on to the core of the first game was nearly cut away, revealing the juicy steak within. The game still has a primary focus on narrative and your personal choices. Your decisions in the first game will very much have an impact on the story of this one. A detail I loved was starting you off with the same gear you had at the end of The Witcher 1 if you imported your save file. Returning characters, people mentioning your past deeds, it all helps to make me believe that Geralt's story is one continuous epic. It immerses me, makes me feel like my decisions are mine and mine alone, affecting the course of history for this richly developed world. One thing you should know is that this game is hard. Combat is extremely rage-inducing. For one thing, I had to completely unlearn everything Dark Souls had taught me about dodge-based combat. You have to roll away from attacks rather than through them, which, you know, is fine, just annoying for me personally. Another thing is, well, you know how in 90% of games you're made of pure iron, taking ludicrous amounts of damage and still standing while your enemies are felled by a few swift swings of your mighty sword? Yeah, in The Witcher 2 those roles are reversed. It's you who can't take more than 4 hits most of the time, and it's your enemies that can take dozens of hits and still only have half their health gone. Not to mention they put multiple opponents on you for the majority of the time. I played on normal, by the way. This difficulty doesn't always seem fair until you figure out just how much is at your disposal. The signs, of course, have returned, better than ever. They aren't overpowered, but a bit of strategy and using them can go a long way to making combat more doable, rather than just swinging blindly and hoping for results. Right, let's address the elephant in the room here, the graphics. This game is gorgeous. The first time you walk out of Flotsam and see that forest, perfection. This game is screenshot heaven, and it was made half a decade ago no less. Most games wish they looked this good even nowadays. Just imagine how mind-blowing it was in 2011, and how impossible it was to run on high graphics. That isn't to say that sacrifices weren't made to accommodate graphical fidelity though. The aforementioned spaghetti noodle corridor world design is a design decision I'm sure was influenced by rendering limitations of the engine. There's a lot of walls you have to climb up and down to get places, the only reason being to separate loaded areas of the map, some of which are quite small. Apart from these minor downsides though, the graphics make this world a joy to be a part of. Now, I'd like to take a minor expedition into the land of Nitpick, where it's always dark, everyone's sad, and there are lots of spiders. You've been warned. Movement in this game feels like you're stapled onto Geralt's back. The perspective is very narrow and makes you feel claustrophobic. Geralt himself moves like he's magnetized to the ground. There aren't a lot of options for maneuvering around the world. The problem of there being way too much boring walking between objectives has been lessened somewhat from The Witcher 1, but the problem still remains. Your movement speed just feels way too slow most of the time. A problem I have with the combat is that getting hit has very little audio and visual feedback. It's just not satisfying to get hit and have Geralt pretty much not react. Heck, I've been literally killed while in a cutscene on multiple occasions, and bleed damage. Oh, don't even get me started on bleed damage. It's somehow even worse than the first game. There's a random chance that any hit from an enemy will cause you to bleed, taking a large chunk off your life, guaranteeing to kill you if you've already lost a good portion of it. It almost seems programmed to occur at the exact moment you're about to win a fight, and then it kills you. Another thing I don't like is the fact that you can't drink potions while in battle. You're forced to drink them well before a fight, but the thing is, you never know when you'll actually need them. There are very few occasions when you know with certainty what you'll be up against or when it's going to happen, making it more about trial and error because chances are you won't know you needed a potion until after you've already died a few times to a fight, forcing you to reload a save. This is especially annoying considering the fact that the only way to effectively heal in battle is to drink the swallow potion beforehand, which, by the way, is pitifully slow considering how much damage your enemies do to you. Tying both the creation of potions as well as the drinking of potions to meditation was a mistake in my opinion. Yes, it reinforces the idea that you must carefully prepare for battles, but they overdid it in my opinion. The mini-games from the first game are back, including poker dice, fist fights, and arm wrestling, all of which are either too boring or too confusing to really care about when I could be playing the actual game. Right, now that I have those petty gripes out of the way, I can get back to talking about how good this game is. Once again, the main reason to play this game is its fantastic narrative qualities. There's still a strong focus on choice and consequences. The game branches into two distinct paths, which have different quests and characters. It must take quite a bit of bravery for a developer to decide to make their game change considerably depending on the choices made by the player. Considerable resources are put into games, and risking having half of the game's content never seen by half of the player base can't be an easy decision to make, but it ultimately paid off in my opinion. Sure, the game might be a bit shorter than the first game and leagues shorter than the third game, but knowing that there's a whole other side to the story to experience in a second playthrough makes it all the more enticing to play it a second time. Part of what makes it so replayable is the quality of its quests, side quests in particular. Witcher contracts in the first game were usually restricted to the old kill X amount of X enemies and then get paid, which is just about the most boring type of side quest you can have in an RPG. Thankfully, they really stepped their game up for The Witcher 2. Every contract is unique and a lot of fun. Sure, there are some low points, but side content in general is top-notch. The acting is too. The improved character models and better voice direction serve to make these characters a lot more authentic this time around. Finally, emotional or intense moments have the gravity which they so deserve. The characters, politics, and lore of the Witcher universe are superb. Every main character stands out from one another and serves a unique purpose within the story. It's hard to think of a game, RPG or otherwise, that can even hold a candle to the writing of the Witcher series. Everything about it just feels like it's meant to be there. The plot of this game has much less of a good and evil morality system. The main villain isn't even really the villain, it's the world around you. This land is so infested with immorality, war, pestilence, and corruptness, it's hard to put a finger on any character that's truly good. The decisions you make aren't black or white, just 1,000 shades of gray. So, in conclusion, The Witcher 2 is a masterstroke of RPG design. It doesn't toy around with you or disrespect your intelligence. It gives you problems and expects you to find the answer by yourself, giving you all the tools necessary to do so. Combat is hard, yes, but requires less raw skill than strategic thinking. If you care about stories in games, there's no better example than the Witcher series, and I can easily see myself replaying the second one over and over again. Now that I've played the first two games, I'm more than excited to jump back into The Witcher 3 to experience a game that has almost universally been hailed a genre-defining masterpiece. My name is Javik, and may we meet again. Oh, and if you're wondering why it's taken so long for me to upload this, you can blame both school and the fact that my PC's power supply decided to crap out on me. Anyways guys, take care.